Absolutely. Let's do it, Jason.
All right, fantastic. So I'd like to welcome everyone to another entry to our webinar series at Forum Infotech. This one is navigating turbulent times, which obviously we're living in right now. My name is Jason. I'm the marketing manager for Forum Infotech. Your host today will be our founder and CEO, Biren Shukla, which most of you know. And we have a special guest presenter today, Anita K, life coach, author of Behaving Bravely, an amazing book, and moderator today as well to help discuss what navigating through turbulent times actually is. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. Throughout this process, we really want to make this interactive. This is a discussion type environment, a town hall, so to speak, because that's the type of conversations that we need to be having right now. So I encourage each of you throughout the process, throughout the webinar, to enter questions into the Q&A section. We'll be reviewing and answering questions in real time, but we also want to keep the flow of the narrative going as well. So again, thanks for coming in. And at this time, I'm going to mute myself and hand the microphone over to Biren.
Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We are in an unprecedented environment. What we are living through personally and professionally is unprecedented. It is scary for all of us. And so when there's so much negativity around, and one thing I wanted to do is, if you know me, I'm a very positive, forward-thinking guy, and I wanted to bring some fresh content to all the people and change the narrative completely. And so this whole thing came to me last week when I was sleeping. I cook up the best ideas when I'm sleeping at night, and I wake up in the morning. I know just the person to reach out. So little backstory on how me and Anita met. We have a hiking group in Corona, and there's a beautiful hike there called Skyline. So we just formed this group. Everybody showed up, but we have an expert hiker in our group who decided that day to challenge not only himself, but the whole group on a whole new different hike. And so here we are going on this hike, and nobody has done this hike before. Nobody can see where the end is, and it's an extremely steep hike. And halfway through the hike, we already know that we're going to have to call emergency, because we're running out of water. We are extremely exhausted. Some people are giving up. And in that moment, we all had to be brave. We had to rally each other. We were supporting each other, and we didn't know any of us didn't really know each other well. But we still bonded, and we were brave during times of crisis. So I immediately thought of Anita. Anita, as you know, is the author of Behaving Bravely, and she lives in Orange County. She's an executive. So I want to kick it off. Anita, give you a chance to respond to that.
Thank you, Biren, and thank you, Jason. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for taking the time, everybody. I understand that we audience not only from the U.S. but from Europe and in India. So my gratitude and infinite thanks for you. Very late at around the clock joining in with us, and I hope it'll be valuable. And yes, it's a true honor to be here. And I've been doing a lot of discussions lately, especially in the media, about how we can really navigate ourselves through our turbulent times. So we're going to take the first half of the webinar, kind of talk about how this is affecting our businesses, no matter small or large size, whether we're entrepreneurs or we're coming from the corporate sector. And then I would love to the second half of the principles of the form that I have that has been very instrumental in my personal and professional life, and that I love, which is outlined in my book. I'm going to tell about what those principles are and how they can really navigate and mind shift us out of times that we're experiencing the stress, uncertainty, and anxiety.
So thank you so much, Anita. I really appreciate it. I was warned by Zoom this morning that there will be some issues with video, especially when you have a lot of participants. So they did warn me, and I hope the video and everything comes out good. If you do see disruption in voice, which I was experiencing just a minute ago, then let's turn off the video and let's make sure we get the content out to the people. So I want to kick it off here and share my screen to talk about a quick survey that we send out and just some responses that we got from the survey. So some of the questions we asked the folks is how prepared were they when the crisis hit, and we got a 50-50 response. Of those that responded, half of them felt that they were extremely prepared. They were already working remotely. They were in the cloud. Many of them felt like they were not quite prepared, and this crisis caught them off guard. Um, we also asked them, what are you doing today to be brave in times like this? Because as you know, these unprecedented times, and none of us in the leadership capacity have experienced a pandemic in at least in our lifetimes. And so how do we react as a leader, Anita, during these times? How do we manage? How do we lead at the top? What suggestions do you have for us?
Baron, definitely. So just a little more background about myself. I've also, been an entrepreneur. I've had 3 companies. Currently my organization, Anita K Solutions consulting firm, and I've been on the agency side in human resources and talent acquisition, and in corporate with large companies like Samsung, which I consult for now, Huawei, the telecom giant, and Broadcom, HP, and United Healthcare. So in my own managerial roles, I've been instrumental in working with clients at all levels of management and coaching them and influencing them on areas, especially when it leads to leadership. And it really starts with us, right? It really is, what is our own personal definition of our own personal leadership? Who do we model and why? What are our ethics? Companies typically have their corporate culture and their mission statements and their vision and values, but going deeper in that funnel and fine-tuning, what organization do you lead in your environment, and what's most important to you, and then developing an engagement and a culture for others to follow. And I think you've got to have your purpose of why you're a leader, and why do you do what you do. And I think the natural leaders that emerge really can say that off the top of their tongue. I'm very passionate. I'm instrumental. I have a cause for this. And it's not just one thing anymore. It's multiple things. Here we see amazing leaders like Bill Gates, who not only founded Microsoft, but founded lots of philanthropic projects all across the globe, and he, and influencing on many levels of many topics. But I think leading by example is one thing. Modeling the leaders that you admire most and why. Sticking to your purpose and why. That doesn't always mean staying at your current company for 20 years. Sometimes that means really being brave and taking the risks and being an entrepreneur, or shifting your leadership to other organizations where you have more like-minded leadership around you as well. And I think what really we see, especially now during these very difficult times, and we're seeing corporations, small businesses, and entrepreneurs in all industries, is how are they behaving, and do they care about the ones that are instrumentally employed in their organizations? And I think that there's things to think about in that area as a leader. So it's decisions. One that comes to mind is, right now, how are we shifting to target messaging during this pandemic? There's a lot of new messaging that we have to gear up to right now. The old messaging is probably going to be put on hold or even archived, but very, very key messages to your clients and your customers about why you're doing what you're doing, what is the new offering, and saying that in a more of a compassionate solution, using social media for key messages. letting customers know of any of your changes and any of your shifts. For example, key messages on information categories. Hey, we're still open. Hey, these are our hours. Hey, this is how you can contact us. Get to know us, you know, through this marketing or communication channel. And I think also emotional supportive appeals, like we're here for you. Just messaging that really goes a long way, and standing behind your message and showing that human side of you, because we are all of, you know, in this together. And so the messaging that we're carefully crafting, targeting, and deploying is going to be key. I think employers, really, a good leader also is very cognizant on knowing and ensuring that they're taking care of protecting their staff, their workers, because employees are worried about protecting their physical and their mental health. And we don't always put ourselves in each other's shoes, but things to think about as a leader, and the best practices from some leaders that I know and model and follow. Do you, as a leader, institute new policies right now? It's really important that we revisit those policies. Are we encouraging our staff to seek their personal care? Do they need to engage in telehealth screenings? Do they know where to go to find those things out? Sending a very firm but very understanding message on social distancing measures. Here in California, where I'm located, we're the 5th largest economy in the United States, and the death toll has been rising nearly to almost 200. And we're being told, you know, different measures of guidance pretty much every few hours. And so if you are an essential business offering and still open, and you have your employees, to really connect there, revisit all of your policies as far as sick leave goes. There's a lot of creative things that we do, and it's up to us leaders to really signify, redefine, and redeploy those. And I think a good leader stays creative and strategic and stays as a thought leader. So what that means is think beyond COVID-19. We're going to see permanent changes. What will our business scale to? How agile do we have to be? Is there another platform of products and services that we want to roll out? If we're a high-tech company, yes, let's still revisit, like many of the tech giants are doing today in our R&D. We've still got to think about 2021, 2022, and 2023, especially in the mobile space and the services sector. And again, as I mentioned, it's really imperative to keep employee engagement at the top of your leadership priority, revisit those vision and values, and really find them, and, you know, that extending hand. But yes, Baron, I think, you know, the uncertainty during the turbulence times is all going to teach us a lot. And as leadership in a wide variety of marketplaces, we really have to be cognizant and understand that could be a really good thing. We're going to learn from the millennials. They're on their 2nd economic crisis. They have a lot of influence in the future government. So there's key points that we from them. They've already disrupted the marketplace, their demands and their interests and their shifting of,
and now there's more disruption coming.
Yeah, definitely.
So this morning, so this
Yes.
is Anita, this is fantastic opening. Many of the people who are on this call are small business owners, and you know, every week there's a new narrative. You have to, you know, understand what's happening and then figure out what is your strategy, how you communicate. And this morning on LinkedIn's live session with Gartner, somebody asked a really good question. They asked, how do I continue to grow and maintain the company culture the way it is today in times like this, when, you know, you're being hit from multiple different areas. You're having to balance, you know, your employees, the vision that you set for 2020, your communication, your clients. There's just so much coming at you, and so quickly. How do you refrain from making a knee-jerk reaction, or how do you balance or bring method to the madness?
I think that's a question. And that really drills down our mindset. and really taking those pauses and moments of stillness to reaffirm, readjust, and basically realign. And I think the time to engage in closer, not from a physical point of view, but from a virtual point of view on, let's listen to employees. What are they saying? It's the same thing at home, and we're listening to kids and what they're saying, and we're listening to our partners, and we're listening to our loved ones. And that requires having a growth mindset. And when we have a fixed mindset, we believe that intelligence, our talents, our fixed traits, our thoughts, and they're set for good. But we really have to migrate over to call a mindset. And that's when we are what we're today, moving into uncharted territory and truly being open to being developed. There's a lot that we learn from our external economic and personal situations right now. And having a growth mindset, that's going to shift our outcomes. I think listening to part-time staff, the non-exempt employees, our full-time leaders that are also aligning with us, no matter what size of role it really is, we've really got to be in a listening gear. And that may mean part-time employees or full-time employees sharing that they're engaging in job, additional side hustles to make ends meet. Let's consider and reevaluate how our employees are managing. And I think it's really important to still build morale. Think of creative, strategic ways that you can. So by you smiling every single day and having scrum meetings, having creative happy hours on Zoom, and being really creative and asking for ideas, and keep that communication going, because we have a lot of unique time on our side. It's a unique time, and the choice is, how do we want to spend that? So I think as a manager, as a leader, it's super interesting and challenging how the scope of leadership is going to change. And if you're not authentic, you're really not going to survive.
That is awesome, Anita. Being authentic. What a wonderful thing to know and be aware. We are facing human crisis. This thing has affected all of us, and we're all in it together. So there is a sense of hope from that standpoint, that it's not isolated to a country or whatever. One of the things here, this week, I think everybody's focused on making sense of the CARES Act, and trying to figure out how they're going to continue to make the payroll and things like that, and how this is going to translate. It's difficult because leaders, business people, they not everybody has a business mindset, right? So
Right.
one of the challenge that C-level executives face during times like this is how do you take what's happening today, the reality, right? Like, okay, some industries are affected, as you know, they're shut down, they've had to furlough employees, and so this business, how do you still be human while having to make tough decisions? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I feel very sensitive to the leaders that don't want to make those decisions, that are put in a do so. And I think it's time to really face the facts and chase the facts. It's our personal responsibility as leaders to understand, what does the Payroll Protection Act look like? What are the SBA loan options? What rights do our employees have right now? And really digging deeper and finding the resources, finding the specialists that can guide and coach you along the way is going to be very key. I think also building a governance system, even as a small business, even as a two-man entrepreneur, creating a governance system on how we make decisions. So that means focusing on data rather than our emotions, which is really hard to do because those auto responses kick in and then we move, right? But it's time to go a little bit more formal in some key areas and understand that our day-to-day business, really depends on it. So using your resourceful and research initiatives is really going to be important. and reading articles and understanding what other companies are doing that are in the same boat. Even if they're not in your industry per se, there's a lot of creative things that can be done. If a company is in positive cash flow and they can't afford to payroll their part-time staff, janitorial, electrical, hospitality, housekeeping are some. If they really afford it, some of them in certain organizations are still being paid through X amount of date. Maybe you buy gift cards for the individuals that you partner with that are critical vendors for you, and you buy some promissory type of services, pay now but you get the service later because of the physical distancing. So I think it's really, those are very simple kind of techniques that come to mind, but it's really about being creative and having the leverage of what you can do. But it's also really instrumental to stay transparent along the way. So don't just say, hey, we're going to be okay, and you know that your business is going to be closing in 90 days. You must be transparent. I think it really goes a long way. And instead of thinking, oh, am I going to be at risk for losing my very lean staff? I think having the candid conversations is really essential. So you've got to run those what I call risk assessments. So, what was working before may not be suitable now, but focusing on the safety measures, how we can safeguard our employees, our finances, our technology, and our operations during this outbreak. And for some, depending on what businesses they are, understand and access your supply chains. Figure out whether your customers are still customers, and do they require something else from you now? And if so, what really can that be? Speak to your suppliers. Is there something new that they can offer you? Definitely be wary of any kind of over promises. And if cash is tight, it's time to be creative and see how you can, like I said, a barter type of service with one another on the customer side and on the vendor side. So again, it's really reviewing, right, our operational risks and accessing them, and even going further. Do we assess what's going on with as we are from a landlord point of view, our office locations, our kitchens, our factories, and start making a pre-check list if we haven't already, to ensure that if we have to change the landscape, we're ready to do so.
Really, really good points. I did want to remind everybody who's in the webinar that Anita has offered to give her book to three books. We're gonna give it away to people, so please give us your questions. This is a town hall environment. Are we on the right track? Are we getting you the information that you need? And at this time, I also wanted to transition into Anita's PowerPoint, where we'll now get into specifics of what does it mean to be brave. So if Jason, you can set that up and share your screen, that would be fantastic. In the meantime, please ask us questions. This is your time. And we want to make sure you get the most out of this time together.
Thank you. And thank you, Jason, for showing us the slide deck now. So my book launched July of 2017. It was in the works for a couple years. And on a personal scale, I never really planned to be an author or let alone a life and career coach. Like so many, I spent many years on the path to happiness. And for much of my adult life, I felt lost and unfulfilled due to my divorce, losing a parent. I too have also experienced losing my company and resulting in severe financial devastation, losing my business, and restarting my entire financial portfolio at the age of 40. So I have too been in dire straits where I just really didn't know where my next dollar was coming from, have answers, or really knew how to scale to my plan B. And what that did after some time is the shame started building up. And just as many individuals that I speak to and clients, you start feeling, that those less than feelings, and your productivity and your confidence and your courage comes to a halt many times. And as much as I wanted to, I was afraid to change until life really forced me to make a much needed transformation. And there's hundreds and thousands of us now across the globe that are facing the same thing. You know, there's a large health and economic impact, but what about the problems we've already been navigating through, in our personal side? Are they more of a priority now? Are they less of a priority? So some individuals really are compounding multiple issues. And so, growing up, I thought I knew how to be brave, but I really realized in my 40s that I didn't have that lion-like courage, and I really had to learn it. And to understand, to put myself in relief, compassion, and forgiveness, most importantly, I had to personally empower myself and really accept life's challenges in a new stride. And that led to a lot of fundamental truths. What I personally discovered and what I talk about in my book, which is, one, starting over is healthy. There is self-actualization and a value in that. We can redesign and reframe our relationships through mindful communication, whether that's on a professional or personal scale right now. And then choosing forgiveness over resentment and staying in that, exercise of deep compassion. Living authentic, living our authentic selves is key. And then the most important thing is really learning how to live and act through a solution-oriented mindset.
I would, Anita, let me
Yes.
interrupt you. That's a great story, and we understand what made you become an author, your journey.
Yes.
So thanks for sharing the intimate journey with us. Many
Great.
of us, including myself, we have self-limiting beliefs. I had at one point, and I had to overcome that. And we all face that. But now many people are feeling that more than ever. They're doubting everything. Am I making the right decisions? And so, uh, help us overcome.
Sounds
You'll
good.
get to it, but I wanted to just kind of
Yes.
mention that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and it's very difficult to navigate around the social contagion right now, right? The social influences, and many of which is very negative, and not to fall into those and those mindsets. We can start moving to the first slide. So in my book, I developed a very simple 5-step system called BRAVE. And it's basically a personal development system that I adhered to after a long series of seeking out solutions in, every area of life. So BRAVE to me really means facing our adversity, managing our suffering, and then learning how to achieve courage. So courage is is the steps that we're building to achieve BRAVE. Next slide, please. Okay, wonderful. So benevolence, this is a term I coined to describe self-beliefs. They are essentially benevolent self-beliefs. So everything starts with our thoughts. If we can maximize our potential and understand how to move through crisis, we must first believe that we can. And with each case study in my book, I start with a belief that's holding my client back and then transform it into a belief that they can use to progress. So for example, I recently had a client that said, in this dire situation of the pandemic, I can't see a way forward in my job or career. So we really understand from what source that emotional feeling is, and we replace it with a more self-serving belief. For example, now she chooses to say, I choose to believe in my future clearly, and I'm going to start a heroic journey to achieve my steps towards my goals. So when we start, so this is putting ourselves in a mind-shifting thought process. So when we have the auto responses where the negative self-talk and doubt enters my mind, I recommend taking a complete pause and stillness and understanding how we can gently be a little bit more benevolent with ourselves and replace that thought with something that's more self-serving. And what this does, it still acknowledges I really recommend that, you know, accepting and acknowledging your stress and your anxiety emotions is necessary, but then making that choice to take the pause and select a new belief that will put you in more relief is key. This turn of thoughts and this putting this in practice can drive us in these fight or flight situations, like we are in today, and can help us make decisions and truly shift us. So sometimes we've got to claim what that feeling is, and then really work on it. So that this is just a quote. We can go on to the next slide. Thank you. The second step in BRAVE is what I call readiness. And this requires you to recognize that there's a need for change and commit to doing so now. It's very similar to, you know, any 12-step program. Nothing's going to until we actually admit we've got a problem and we must need a needed thought to move forward. So only when we're ready for this type of transformation, however small or however large it is, it will work. So it really calls for taking a personal pulse and reflecting with our current attitudes and our dispositions before we can change them. So when we move into readiness, it starts the planning within our mind. Sometimes it requires forgetting about perfection and keeping that plan B alive, and addressing and acknowledging our feelings along the way, and managing resistance is really imperative.
You
Next
brought up
slide.
some really, really good
Yes.
points here, which I wanted to reflect on. You said having a plan B, and sometimes it's very, very hard for people who are perfectionists, people who want everything, think it through, analyze it, who are planners. We like to call in our company, we use the DISC methodology, and we know
Yes, that's a very good one.
we have some really, really great planners in our company who are also owls, who are very factual. But right now we just don't have, we just don't have the time. We have to move so quickly. We have to sometimes take these decisions where we feel we're unprepared because we just don't have enough time to analyze it, yet we
We
have to
don't
make a
have the
decision.
luxury.
Right.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And I think when we stay in a when we stay in a careful, thoughtful leadership mode, and before we act, because right, we're used to doing what we're used to doing. So right now, what this is a recommendation is a new way of practicing our communication style, leading, listening, and understanding how we make decisions and why. So it's really shaking us up all. And it's difficult to do, you know, mid-age, in our older age. But if we don't do it, our thoughts can hold us hostage, and they can be detrimental to making poor personal and professional decisions because it instills more fear. And when we move outside of that comfort zone or what we're used to doing, that fear is enforced, and it strengthens our belief that something is more dangerous, more risky, or worse, feeling trapped that there's no way out. So as I talk about in the book, behaving bravely is really mind shifting, starting with our thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs to help us conduct our behavior accordingly.
Great.
We can go to the next slide. Okay, and the third step in BRAVE is alignment. And you know, this is basically pretty straightforward, getting our ducks in a row. You know, if we are going to look for a new job, do we have our ducks in a row? Is our resume ready? Have I been on an interview recently? Do I have an updated LinkedIn profile? Do I have my set of references? What compensation is industry standard, etc. But two things under alignment that I think are really imperative, and it's what I really turn to, is one, what I call is establish an A-team. So an A-team is lining up the right individuals in the right areas to support you, especially when you need help. We don't have to face all of our fears alone. And as leaders at any level, it's really imperative to continue to have mentors, coaches, and guides that can lead us along the way. And I personally think A-team is in 5 areas. I have somebody for my professional side, my personal side, my health side, spirituality, and emergency. And they're not my best friends, and they're not boyfriends, and they're not my mom, but they are key individuals that I know I can have candid, very objective feedback from, with no judgment. It's kind of a safe zone, and I can really get the information that I need. It can be a 5-minute dialogue. It can be an email trying to get an answer about something, what have you. And then the second thing is, because as leaders, sometimes we also get caught in the solitude and the isolation. It's not just being in the four walls of our home, but when we're not instrumental of really collaborating with other best minds out there, that it can grow into isolation, which is very crippling to productivity. So solitude is okay, but when you're in isolation, you have to be very careful. And the second thing is, do we have the right environment to support us? I think in the survey, there was a lot of individuals that have not worked from home. This is their very first time. And I think, taking a pause, and do you have the right environment to support you? First of all, do you have the right individuals in your environment to support you? Is your infrastructure conducive? Is there clutter you have to clean? It may sound like the most simple basics, but they're key into enhancing your motivation and your clarity. So environment is very, very critical. And to affect change and to center yourself and account for these factors are all going to impact our behavior.
Great.
So that's alignment.
So Anita, on that note, people people are scratching their heads right now. I've got employees on payroll. Maybe there's just not enough work to go around. A really good question came in, that is this a good time to invest time and money in new technology or training existing staff?
Yes.
What are your suggestions?
Excellent question. I think it's a time for all of us, even if we don't have professional careers, that if we don't come out of this pandemic with learning one or two skills, or have new ideas to approach our life very differently and pragmatically, we're not maximizing our potential during the pandemic. If we have the access to resources, or we have the funds, and we can take advantage of very minimal training like lynda.com and Udemy and Coursera and things like that. And there's a lot of organizations that provide those services that are doing very creative ad hoc things to continue to build us up. So we can't stop dreaming, and we can't stop learning. And I think this is the time to learn that second language. This is the time to learn the instrument if you've got the time. This is the time to learn Excel and create that bulldozing effect, because I think what is going to empower us, that keeps us in the ready mode, because there's going to be another pandemic, there's going to be another economic meltdown, and how we handle staying brave and how we learn how to be resourceful is our ultimate armor. So yes, I'm a big fan of moving forward. If you have the resources, if you have the time, and you've got the funds, and if not, to try to identify and access what you can get your hands on. Excellent question.
Thank you so much, Anita, for that. How do you because as you know, you mentioned somewhere that the millennial generation is going through their second.
Yeah, I think I was kind of pulling from 2002 to 2008, right? But I think I really interested on how millennials think. And I'm also very grateful on the senior working environment, or seniors, and how they've adapted to all of the change, working with individuals at that age group. But I think there's a lot that we can learn, and that's what I really wanted to point out. Back in the days, job hopping and side hustles were frowned upon, and the millennials helped break that. Virtual communication, the millennials are helping us there. Understanding how freelance work can be an asset to supplement our financial side and gain that additional experience, the millennials were kind of instrumental in introducing that. And I think it all goes back to we're having more than one dream is very necessary. I love my HR and entrepreneurship, running my company and understanding and watching those profits and things like that. But my real passion is where I volunteer or where I'm working with, you know, young Asian men on how they can, you know, groom themselves to be brave and, you know, as future hiring leaders. So I think it's a time to draw upon experts in all areas.
That's excellent. So
Yeah.
keep going. Sorry, not to
Okay,
interrupt.
no problem. No, I welcome that. And the fourth step in brave is vision. A lot of people say, well, how come it's not number one? Because you've got to get ready. And sometimes having a vision just doesn't start like that. Sometimes it starts from a pipe dream. Sometimes it starts from a dream. And sometimes it starts from your curiosity. So until you really do a lot of good introspection, it's very imperative to form a vision. And basically that's seeing your desired destination and the road of how to get there. And creating that plan and viewing yourself honestly and compassionately. There's a lot of fantastic influencers out there in the world. There's a neuroscientist I follow called Joe Dispenza, who I think is also from Southern California, but travels the globe and talks about how we can create an unconscious you know, way into our future and how to connect it to our conscious. And basically it's simple. It's living the life as you've already arrived. So the adult daydreaming and the curiosity and really having the confidence and a healthy amount of risk to actually live in your future desired state can be super beneficial and good for your health. So that's vision. And then next slide, please. And then the last step in our brave paradigm. Can we move to the last slide? Thank you. Sorry, the slide before was just
maybe Anita, you can recap a little bit for us because you went through 4 steps. So before you go to the last, maybe you can recap.
Sure. So absolutely, I would love to. So BRAVE stands for benevolence, benevolent self-beliefs. You know, many times when we think about ourselves, we automatic are hard on ourselves. So when we think about where we want to go and self-identifying who we are, it's very important to have benevolent self-beliefs. The second is moving to readiness, recognizing that there's a need to change. And what's that why of why I got to do some now? Again, it could be small, it could be something big, it could be life altering. And the third is alignment, getting that A-team and making and securing an environment that's going to align you to move forward. And then 4, we just talked about, is vision, seeing your desired destination and the road to get there. And that'll help you create that plan. And it's very important here on your vision to view yourself honestly and compassionately. I can't stress that enough. Sometimes we have these visions and we're, again, the negative self-talk arises.
Yeah.
So it's really important to be sensitive if you have those habitual thought patterns, how to really minimize them. And that takes us to the last step in BRAVE, which is engagement. And that's that's basically engaging in what you have to do to really take off with action. So there's action, there's exploration, and then you can truly experience. And right now during the pandemic, or while our businesses and our home lives are being altered, you know, managing the unknowns, you know, the layoffs, the restructuring, we're getting media, you know, honing in on all types of very difficult information to swallow, creating anxiety, panic attacks, and more health issues. So what I love to say about about engagement is stay in your lane as best as you can. Stay engaged at work, chase the facts, and focus on your day-to-day progress. For those that have been affected by monumental change with health, their jobs, their economic situations, it's time to go back to the basics. Take care of yourself, make a simple game plan, review your finances, confirm your healthcare options, review your terms on your mortgage, and you know, go back to the basics. Take a little time and understand where you really sit to know what you have to shift to move on to next.
Anita, you made a great point.
I can search the web for that. Just tap.
Sorry about that.
That's a great point. And I want to ask you there about mindset. You talked about mindset. What is a good, we are all habitual to looking at the news all the time, turning the TV on, and the first thing that we see when we wake up and go to bed is news about this virus and the deaths and what's going to happen. I mean, to the point that I can speak for many people that they're unable to sleep.
Absolutely.
So how can we, what is the
Absolutely.
small change we can make in the morning, in our routine, morning or night? What should we do? Give us tips.
It's really important to not stay in that pessimistic mindset and move to optimism. So every day, I think the first thing is we change our morning routine. And sometimes that means not checking your phone and not checking the computer and not turning on the television. Maybe playing soft music, practicing some breathing exercises, looking out the window, making that cup of coffee in silence. So it's really going back to the basics and doing things that you're really not used to doing because you're so used to moving around and generating and connecting information. So it's really time to take a pulse and shift how we currently do the things we do and how we think about them. So those are a few little tips. Wellness routine is going to be imperative right now. Social distancing, yes. Social, but emotional connection, you want to keep that going. And now there's technologies to support us there. I think also what's been interesting is also follow content that is going to enlighten and educate you for 30 minutes a day. Follow a motivational speaker, read a good book, engage in a hobby, build a new skill. And it doesn't have to be something that advanced. It can be something like baking, cooking, learning something about dogs, whatever it may be for you. Planning your next vacation. I think it's still very important to stay in planning mode, 6 months, 3 months, just like we do in business, in our personal lives. And then finally, implementing, if you haven't already, or strengthening some type of physical routine. Physical and mental go hand in hand. They're actually very codependent and interdependent on one another. And so it's really easy right now just to kind of slide down during the four walls that we're in. But if you engage in mindful practices and keep them very simple, you might create new habits that are worth sticking to. And that's going to enhance your outlook and how you manage when you watch the news and the media. And it's going to help with these small transformations. And in my book, it's a self-help book, but I take readers on a journey to healing, self-discovery, and how we can live our freedom through the relatable stories of my own and many of my clients. Nothing's off the table. We talk about addictions, we talk about financial devastation, career mishaps, broken relationships, communication breakdowns, and so forth. And readers can take advantage of several affirmations, working the brave paradigm a little bit more at your own pace, and learn, and then there's contemplation and coaching techniques at the end of every chapter.
That is fantastic. So I did have a question right now, and then towards the end, you can tell everybody how they can follow you, where they can get your book, how they can contact you for maybe engaging you to speak in their companies to inspire.
I love that.
But communication, I wanted to focus on that. A lot of our staff and employees have all of a sudden, those are there in the cloud, they were already working fine, but still they were in an office environment. And now all of a sudden they're away from each other, not seeing each other that often. There are tools out there like Slack and Teams and things like that that are available. So can you speak maybe not so much on the tool side, because that we got that and we can help our clients with that, but communication, like it's imagine a baby boomer having to communicate now through this new tool, new medium, new method. Give us tips and suggestions around that.
And right, some of us are terrible at online communication. Many of us are very successful, person to person. That's why we choose the working styles that we do. And when we're forced to communicate like this, can you imagine how many misunderstandings we have with one another?
Yep.
So the easiest thing that you want to keep in mind is mindful communication. Would you send out that communication? Don't send it out if you're not willing to say it to somebody personally, face to face. So communication is all about being mindful, being respectful, definitely being patient, being heard, and sometimes right now being very simple. And before we go into the analysis mode and the what ifs and the long explanations, make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's, that what is our intention behind the communication? I talk a lot about this in my relationship coaching. Intention is very, very critical to avoid misunderstanding and putting up the walls, right? And siloing ourselves. And leadership does this sometimes very well and sometimes not so well. Implementing humor. You know, I think that's very important too. So sometimes these icebreakers, even though we know individuals so intimately, are still really required. So being mindful, being creative, really not jumping to the emotional side of what you're really feeling, because you can't take a text back, you can't take that email back. And you know, hiring managers have to really be mindful of making sure that content that's being sent to in between employees is all HR appropriate as well. So when we are sending those jokes back and forth, and you know, it's time for leaders to also set some parameters about acceptable and appropriate and motivating communication.
You know, Anita, I want to thank you so much because you have touched on so many things. You've talked about, you took us from where we are at, what we are feeling. You gave us actionable advice, 5-step, very simple, on things we can do to continue to stay positive. So why don't you take us, maybe Jason, if you can share the slide. And maybe have some final closing thoughts. I really took a lot of notes. I'll tell you what I took away from this. I feel that there was something you talked about, that we are all in it together. Don't be,
Yes.
you know,
We're not alone in our
we're
fears.
not alone. And
yeah, we're not alone in our fears. And I think showing the vulnerability is key to moving forward.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. In Vistage, the group I belong to, we talk about that. Being vulnerable is actually a strength.
It's actually a strength, yeah.
Leaders sometimes feel like I need to be brave, and they always try to put a face where deep down they're feeling lost, like they've lost the battle. And so being vulnerable is an excellent point. So the last slide, Jason, 14, is perhaps how we can just show that one.
Yes, please stay connected. I welcome, I give a lot of advice away under 30 minutes for no charge. I'd be happy to hear from you on any matter within the life and career and business sector. And I'm very grateful to be part of this experience with all of you today. Thank you for the opportunity.
Anita, if you have one more question.
I do.
We talked about.
I'd love to hear more questions. Yes.
So
we'll go through them fast.
Yep. And so this one was about the email communication. We make mistakes in times like this. It's very easy to get carried away because you feel like you want to lead, you want to manage, and you may fire off an email to your staff, and you may have written something that you want to retract. How do you, let's say you make a boo-boo like that. What do? You
be vulnerable and you apologize. Yeah. Yeah. You retract it by being your human self and saying, I apologize if my tone was out of context. What I really would like to reiterate are these 3 points. I love when leaders talk about email communication in a bullet form points. That kind of keeps you a little more safe. If you have an admin, or if you have a right arm person in your business, or just a friend who's really good at oral communication, run it by, get a second opinion before you send it out. If you think that there might be some language in there that might be upsetting, most chances are there probably is. So getting a second rundown, or waiting for an hour, taking some deep breaths. I know that sounds very, very basic. And then looking back at that email. So firing things off is never helpful unless it's a true emergency and you've got an emergency response system like emergency professionals do. Other than that, employees should know what to expect. I think that's really important. You're just talking about the leaders that show vulnerability. You'll know when your hiring managers and your leaders are authentic, because they behave, they share. They even talk about the weaknesses. They talk about the what ifs. But what I think is really important, why people hang on to the individuals that they do, is they stay in optimism. there's hope. We're all in this together. So whatever your company vision and values are, and if you don't have any, please implement some, because it can be a strategic way to hire and maintain your employees and rally them at all times. But yeah,
Anita,
I think sometimes you have to
100%.
simple sorry.
That's great advice, and by the way,
We've all done it, right?
they
We've all
loved
done it.
we've all, and you know what? It takes
We've all
courage,
done it.
and it goes in line with what you told us today, is that being honest, being human, and now is a fantastic time to look at, like you said, everything. Go back to basics. Evaluate everything. Is our vision correct? How do we need to pivot? Are solutions valid past COVID-19? I mean, are they gonna be relevant? So question everything and do some critical thinking. This is the time, and those that do it will come so, they'll come ahead.
They'll become roaring in like a lion. And that's what
Exactly.
we all want to do.
Exactly. So here's a question from somebody is in that boat right now. They're a training company. They are used to giving face-to-face training. All of a sudden, there's no contact. And if this continues now, how can they convince their clients to accept this new format of training?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you have to show your value. And you have to know what your value is. So what is your value proposition as a training company? And change the communication and expand the communication to other channels is the best thing that you can do immediately. But you've got to use words like the word value, and sometimes doing an emotional appeal in your conversations about running the risk of us not developing in these key areas, and the best practices that you've seen in the industry. So add the facts, talk like you really are on the same page and you understand how sensitive the situation is, but really know your value proposition. That has to be key. So it might not be the same message that you had before. So depending on the type of training that you offer, it's now going to be tailored differently. But it goes back to, why do we do this? What is that why? And people will see the passion and they'll see the sincerity, and you're going to have to give it time. We're piloting a lot of new messages right now. And it's not a first priority, with some, but it is with others. So I think being a very very strong influencer and advising on the benefits is really key. So advising on the benefits, being sensitive in the language that you use, and really showing value.
Wow.
And of course, adjusting pricing, maybe the not the quality, but the amount of training. Do you have a training that's 10 hours long for one day? Maybe right now, that's not the best to do while we're working from home. I don't know. Is there something creative that you can do? Can you give something away in addition to that, another extra hour of training? People are really looking for companies that are sensitive to what's happening right now. Let's take a large corporate conglomerate like Tide. They are setting up dry cleaning at various emergency response centers, and they're doing it for free. So personnel in healthcare don't have to go home and wait to wash the clothes. So, who's ever going to forget that? So I'm going to switch to Tide, right? So it's not it's what can you do for me, and you have to think. One thing I really love, and I think about this for myself in my coaching practices: how can I serve you? Not how I can help you, but really, how can I serve you?
Oh, that is fantastic. I can't think of any other better way to end it. Can you repeat that one more time, what you just said?
Yes. Instead of saying, how can I help you? You might want to say, and this can be an oral and written communication, is how can I serve you?
That is fantastic. So, Jason, do we have more questions? Do we want to open up the lines for any live questions?
Happy to. If people have time, absolutely.
All right, team.
No?
First of all, an amazing content. Thank you very much. Are there any additional questions that anyone has? We are doing a book giveaway. We're going to randomly choose from our attendee list. Thank you everyone for joining us. You all can reach back out to us via the email invite or connect to us through social media for any follow-up questions. I'd like to thank again Anita K for an amazingly fantastic webinar, and thank you, Baron, as well for being a gracious host. And I think that's it.
Jason, thank you so much, Anita. I cannot thank you enough, but somebody raised a hand and I wanted them to ask a question.
Did we get a new one? Oh, okay.
It's me. Hi, Anita.
Hi
this
there.
is Ricardo.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you too. So my question is for our clients and people who are used to the term walking the four corners. They're used to being there and walking around and talking to their direct reports and employees and being able to have that face-to-face. And right now, of course, with everybody spread out, what are the things that you would, we spoke about email communication and some meetings and all that,
point.
but what would you suggest in terms of frequency of meetings? What kind of daily hurdles to keep that togetherness of us?
Yes, I think that's an excellent question. As a leader, keep messaging every day how accessible everybody is, even after hours or through their phone or email, what have you. And I think I get asked this a lot. 3 times a week are good to have scrum meetings or huddles. And if you can do them through Zoom and people are okay doing it through Zoom video, and maybe having a contest like, hey, today's going to be hat day, everybody come on video with their favorite hat, or if you have children, bring your children by our side. So come up with creative ways that motivates your employees to feel that they're not in an office, but they're still having fun and they're still really engaging with their colleagues at work. And, you know, can you have a virtual lunch hour together, like a lunch and learn, and share, hey, I found these best 3 tips today about how we can be more productive working from home, or what have you. Do a lot of surveys. They don't have to be formal. Hey, today, does anybody have any ideas on this? So reaching out to them frequently is very imperative. Some people are doing scrum meetings every single morning at a certain time, so you know what to expect. You kick off the day knowing you've seen everybody and they seem to be doing okay. I think that's a good thing, even if they're just 15 minutes. People can opt out for those that maybe don't need that style. Everybody has a different style, but if you have a smaller company, it's our responsibility as the manager to really understand what motivates and what style employees have. And there might be that one introvert mad scientist that, you know, has got his glasses on and you can only see his eyes and, you know, on the screen. It's okay, let's still treat him with respect, and maybe he doesn't engage in, you know, some kind of happy hour, but try to mandate some things that are very light and airy, and pilot it out at least for a week or 2. And then take a pulse. Is this working for everybody, team? Not working? Okay, forget it. You know, do you have any ideas, what have you? But I think humor and making light of things and then having the meetings in the day as supplemented with some type of happy hour is very helpful.
Wow.
I mean, alcohol, you can make a choice. I just read an article, Ricardo, that now they're suffering from corporate hangovers because everybody's doing these Zoom meetings and allowing, you know, their employees to have happy hours. So just be careful. Depends on the nature of your business.
No, thank you so much, Ricardo. That was a fantastic question.
I hope that helps.
Hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Good, thank you. So thank you, Anita. You were gracious. We went over the time. Really, again, getting some great feedback from all the attendees. We are so thankful for the content that you shared today. You've literally given us some hope, and I hope that people found this useful. We'll continue to bring you good content like this. Our next webinar is going to be centered around utilizing Teams, Microsoft Teams, and video conferencing. Of course, we have a lot of experience being a virtual company for the last 4 years. So we want to, again, empower our people to learn these things and implement it. Again, thank you, Anita, so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, everybody.
be brave. Be brave.
Yes, I want to thank everybody for your participation, your interest. Feel free to keep in touch, and I wish you all a very safe time throughout this, and of course, a life of behaving bravely.
Awesome. Thank you, Anita.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.